Yeah, so we'll kick this off. So I'm Pete Zerger. I'm Wes's counterpart south of the border down here in Texas. So I focus on Wes and I overlap a lot on cloud and automation and identity and management. So I'm going to get right into it. And what we're going to do is walk through 7 or 8 tips here. We're going to leave about 10 minutes at the end for Greg to jump in, and he has quite a bit in terms of tips around Microsoft Teams he wanted to share. So we wanted to give him some space to give you kind of a condensed version. I know he did a longer session a few weeks ago, but now he can kind of do something when you're right up against all of your school commitments. So tip number one I want to throw out there, and this is going with what I think is a pretty safe assumption. You're all using fairly recent versions of Windows 10. You're using some form of configuration manager and Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager in some sort of hybrid management scenario. So we've surfaced the most important of the tips. I think we could spend about 3 hours just going through all of the other things that we might cover, and maybe we'll throw out an addendum with some of those tips that might make your lives easier, particularly for those of you that might be on legacy versions of Config Manager and so forth. We have some tips there that might make life easier as you try to get, keep your cadence moving forward with modern management. But the first one is really easy, and that's just making sure Azure AD Connect is up to date, so your device matching and sync is as good as it can be. So Microsoft occasionally adds bug fixes to autopilot device matching or sync performance. You want to make sure your Connect install is up to date, and Microsoft actually added an automatic upgrade feature. So you may want to go back and just touch your Azure AD Connect install and see what your configuration looks like. If you've installed recently, they actually auto-enable automatic upgrade, but it's only for like express settings and specific scenarios. So you just want to make sure you fall into that camp, because if you don't, we've definitely, even in our own customer base on the commercial side of things, so outside of education, we've seen some folks that wind up with weird sync problems. And lo and behold, we get our hooks into the environment and discover that Azure AD Connect is just woefully out of date. So bear that in mind. Wes, why don't you talk to number 2? I'll just auto advance the slides for you over here.
All right, sorry, I had to come off mute there. Yeah, so the way autopilot hybrid join works, which is what a fair number you that we've worked with anyways are doing. When the machine boots up out of the box, it checks with Azure AD because it's assigned to an Azure AD tenant. Azure AD or Intune hands it a domain join profile to tell it where to go and join Active Directory on-prem, and it creates a device object in your Active Directory. At that point, the device needs to communicate with Active Directory to update the object with a self-signed certificate, and then Azure AD Connect needs to synchronize that object from your on-prem AD up into Azure AD, where it then gets matched. So once it's matched, Windows then checks. Windows is continually polling in the background to see if that sync has been completed, and that check to see if the device registration is complete happens when you lock the screen or freshly log onto a device. But there's 2 ways of improving the sync performance, and one is to set up a scheduled task on your Azure AD Connect server to basically tell it to synchronize do a delta sync every 5 minutes. So by default, it's every 30 minutes. And so if you manage to hit that at the wrong point in that sync interval, you could be waiting an extra, 28, 29 minutes for the device object to get up and match an Azure AD to continue on with the autopilot hybrid join process. So by running that scheduled task on your Azure AD Connect server, it helps. You can potentially drop it down to 5 minutes for that sort of matching with Azure AD. And then there's a second script that you can deploy out to your autopilot devices And we'll drop a link for a guide on guide to doing this later. But there's a second script that you can deploy to your actual workstations to basically tell Windows to check in a little bit faster, or more frequently rather, to see if that sync has been completed. So it can move along a little bit faster with the hybrid AD join scenario. Pete?
Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. We'll definitely need to drop you some links there. So number 3 is around configuration manager, and this was something that came up a couple of times pretty early on when folks reached out saying, hey, we're going to be schooling from home, we're going to have teachers at home, we need to deal with connectivity and resources and updates and all of those things that are going to be in one way or another impacted because folks are working from home, they're connected over VPN. And I remember one of the first sort of bad scenarios we got into was a situation where we had a bunch of folks connected via VPN and no way to identify which folks were, where the VPN boundary lied. So there wasn't a clear IP range defined for VPN, and that's not something I would expect most orgs to think about. About a quarter of my time, I'm a virtual chief information security officer for a bank, one of our customers, and so we think about these sorts of things because we've got a lot of resources to think about these sorts of things. So we have a boundary that identifies VPN. And so if you don't, that can be challenging. Now in Config Manager, and I believe it was in build 2006. So in 2006, we saw a new VPN boundary group capability. And also the ability to configure our VPN connected clients to prefer cloud-based content sources. So basically preferring cloud-based over on premises, so we can avoid, choking the internet pipe essentially, which could then impact learning. And that's the real bottom line, right? You want to make sure that you can keep everything secure, you can keep people connected to the resources, but you're not impacting students in any way that might be coming in as well. And so getting to the latest, getting to version 2006 or later is, 2006 is where you'd want to be. We'll give you some of that work from home sort of friendly capability that potentially negates the need for other configurations that might lead you into the area of complexity. So if you're looking for an easy button, this feels like something of an easy button to me, and I won't pretend like the update to Config Manager 2006 is silky smooth every time, but it's manageable usually. If it goes right, it is kind of a non-event. But you do want to do a little planning there to make sure you handle this step when you're not in the middle of a work day where you're relying on a lot of activity, right? So this is a great Friday afternoon activity when folks are checking out for the weekend, I think. Over to you, Wes.
All right, so one of the things that we've really been focusing on a lot in our past few deployments, both with education and enterprise, is leveraging group tags. Initially with autopilot, group tags weren't editable. So once your devices came into autopilot, they were stuck with the tag that was assigned. And if it was from a vendor, it would be your order ID. If it was imported from SCCM, it was whatever it imported with. But those tags now are editable, and so what we've done is we've been working around leveraging those tags to, especially on the multi or distributed location organizations like yourselves, where you have schools in different locations, and you might have a short code assigned to each school. We've been working on leveraging those group tags to identify the location a device might belong to. Pete, if you'll just move forward another step. So by updating the tag on a Windows autopilot device, we can associate it with a particular location, and this in turn we can use with things like dynamic device groups to assign policies or applications that might be specific to a location, or even perhaps with one enterprise we worked with, a department within a particular sub-company. This was a fairly large organization, but anyways, we leverage those tags so that we can really precisely target applications and policies to specific groups of individuals within a department or within with devices that are associated with a specific location. Pete, can you move forward? I want to talk about another benefit that we got out of the group tags. Just one more. Yeah, there we go. So sorry, one click more, Pete. So with
right here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
With autopilot naming, your Azure AD devices by default, you're able to assign sort of a static prefix, if you will, to the device name, and then you can choose to use a serial number or a set of random characters if you're just joining Azure AD. If you're doing a hybrid AD join, you can assign a prefix, and then the service will generate a random string for the rest of the name as it joins Active Directory on-prem. So what we've done, Pete, if you'll move forward one more slide.
Yep.
What we've done is we've added, if you can just build this out, we've added some support in Mobile Suite for updating group tags automatically in the background. So if you assign a device to a location in Mobile Suite, so you already have your locations, folks who are already on Mobile Suite using it for iOS, those same locations, you can now assign your Windows devices to those locations. And in the background, Mobile Suite will go and take the short codes for those locations you've already got and update the group tags to map to those locations. And Mobile Suite will also generate a dynamic device group for autopilot devices at each one of those locations. So you don't need to do the manual work of creating those dynamic Azure AD groups for policy and application assignment. So Mobile Suite updates your Windows device group tags, create the dynamic group for each one of your locations, so that each one of those, you can target each one of those locations, and then Mobile Suite will also drive naming. You can create a similar to what we're doing with iOS. You can define a naming format for a particular autopilot profile. So similar to what we're doing on the iOS side, you could put in a variable for location code and then the asset tag or serial number variable behind it. And so then your devices, as they join, this works with both your Azure AD and hybrid AD join. As your devices join through the autopilot process, they'll get named to the location code that it belongs to, along with the serial number. So Pete, I think that's all I got for this slide.
Cool. So we have some good news here. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is facilitate largely automated per location, naming, grouping, and management, ensuring your device names are up to date. And the hope would be that maybe there comes a day where you don't care so much about the naming, right? But we wanted to provide some flexibility so you can kind of continue down this modernization road at your own pace. And especially right now, I think that's pretty important. So we had a chat about, we built this feature out to help a couple of boards in particular that had said, hey, we're really struggling with this. So what we wanted to do, just in light of everything that's going on, Movo Suite for Windows is what we called that, and it's very inexpensive anyway, but we thought, let's just give this to anybody who needs it to get through the school year. So Movo Suite is a cloud-based app. It's 100% Azure resident. It's out in the marketplace. If this sort of naming control will help you, we will fully license you for this with our compliments. It doesn't take too much to set this up. If you need a hand there, you can drop us a line and we'll do what we can to kind of help you get through it. It's not rocket science, but I think we can probably help you get it done on your own there pretty quickly. But if this will benefit anybody, please reach out to us. We'll throw an email address up at the end. So we just want to make life as easy for you all as we can at this point, because we've heard the struggle. I had somebody on the phone the other day that said they were curled up in the fetal position just trying to deal with the onslaught. So if we can help here, take this with our compliments anyway. So onward. So here's another thing that comes up pretty commonly. So when you move into the world of co-management, you're connecting your on-premises management infrastructure with Intune, fully leveraging Endpoint Manager. You need to enable HTTPS and Config Manager to support that co-management reality. And if I were to take a poll here, I would guess that probably 4 and 5 folks out there, or a good 9 and 10, probably don't feel like they're a super expert when it comes to PKI. So that's an area where I spend a fair bit of time with PKI management upgrades, etc. And it's pretty hairy stuff. So I fully appreciate that it can be complicated. So you do want to enable HTTPS to get to co-management. What I wanted to point out, though, is you can actually go a step further, and this is something you might not know if you're not out there reading the latest updates from Config Manager, and that's their new enhanced HTTPS. So enhanced HTTP is a feature Microsoft brought forward to basically deal with the reality that managing your own PKI and getting Config Manager communication up to HTTPS can be challenging for folks. So when you get to, I believe it was ConfigMan 1806, so it's not even the latest greatest version. They added this feature, and what it's going to do is secure sensitive client communications. Clients can securely access content from your DPs without needing a network access account, without needing a certificate or Windows authentication. So bear in mind, this is not 100% HTTPS. So anything other than those secure client, those sensitive client communications, and then the content acquisition from the DPs, that's what enhanced HTTP is dealing with. Everything else happens over clear, in the clear over HTTP. So if you need to go that extra step, you're going to have to look at PKI. But I think this is a great, this is kind of an easy button for this. Wes, you can chime in here. I think you actually deployed the enhanced version here not too long ago.
Yeah, it was resolved a few oddities we were seeing with the internal PKI.
Yeah, I think one of the real things this helps with is we find a lot of folks have sort of dated PKI out there, and this eliminates the need for configuring certificate templates and auto enrollment and so forth. So for a lot of folks, this is a big time saver. So remember this feature. If you haven't already gone down that road of fully connecting yourself with co-management and enabling HTTPS.
Yeah, so another benefit that just rolled out with the latest version of ConfigMan is the convergence of delivering Software Center applications through the Intune company portal. So now we can start leveraging sort of a single avenue, if you will, for our users to procure or install applications on their machines, without telling them, okay, for this set of applications, you need to go into Software Center, and for this set of applications, you need to go into Intune company portal. And so now we can just drive them to the company portal, and we can deliver both our SCCM applications and our Intune applications through that one interface. Peter, if you'll move to the next step, I got a screenshot on sort of what that looks like. So just like you would see with Office, Office Click to Run was one of the first things you folks have probably already pushed through co-management if you're doing co-management. If you're not, we can help you get to co-management. But Office Click to Run is one of the first workflows we see folks moving. But now, and historically, it's been okay. We're going to either push Office Click to Run down to the endpoint, or we'll tell the users to go into the company portal and install from here. So now we can surface things like Edge delivered from ConfigMan through that company portal UI. And Peter, if you'll move on another step, I want to talk through tenant attach. So tenant attach is essentially, to boil it down, you're basically uploading your device data from SCCM to Intune. Is really what it boils down to. But Intune can now use that data that's been uploaded. So even though the device may not be enrolled into Intune for management, or co-management, Intune can still perform some actions, and Microsoft is adding more features. So Intune communicates with ConfigMan on the back end to drive things like inventory or application installation. And Pete, if you'll move forward another slide, please.
Yeah, you bet.
I got a couple screenshots of what this looks like. So here's an example screenshot. So in the Intune portal now, sorry, I keep calling it Intune. We'll call it the proper Microsoft Endpoint Manager brand name. In Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center, we can see SCCM information. So instead of pulling up my SCCM console, or Config Manager console rather, and trying to find this information, it's all surfaced in that one unified interface for both my Intune devices and my SCCM devices. And if you'll move forward another step, Pete, so we can see what collections a particular device is a member of. Even though, keep in mind, this device is not managed by Intune yet. Pete, if you'll move forward another step, we can now also trigger SCCM application installation on a device. So again, even though Intune is not managing this device, we can use the Intune portal to initiate that application installation on a device. And then just rolling out now is a new timeline view. So that information that's come from ConfigMan, we now get a really nice timeline of events that have occurred on that device, all without needing to actually go back to my Config Manager console to access this information. So really a useful feature to turn on, and I think that just got added in Config Manager 2002. So if you're not at least at that, I'd recommend getting up to date to 2002 and ideally 2006. Pete, I think that's all I've got there.
Perfect. Thank you, Wes. Yeah, and I didn't add it to the list here. If there's anybody out there that needs to upgrade your site server, Config Manager has a new passive site server feature that'll allow you to have a primary and a secondary. And we actually did an upgrade here recently. I've used this a couple of times now. But if you've got an existing site server and you need to do an update to swap in a newer system, and you don't want to disrupt your day-to-day activity, what we did was deployed a passive site server and then flipped it between the passive and active. So we deployed a new site server, promoted it to active, and then retired what was then legacy site server. So just park that in the back of your head. If you have a site server refresh you need to do, reach out and ask for the how-to, and I'll point you to the article and give you a couple of the gotchas that we encountered as we went through that. So I can promise you it's really smooth when you do it in the lab, and it's much more interesting when you're doing it in an environment with dozens or potentially hundreds of distribution points. So there's another sort of free resource I wanted to throw out at you. So Wes and I, as part of our day job, we have developed a chat bot called Simon, and it's based on Microsoft's bot framework. Microsoft's featured us at their Build conference. They did a case study on Simon recently because we're doing things with their APIs that people aren't really doing yet. But what we're going to do on the 23rd of this month is a Power Virtual Agent in a Day, kind of a one-day virtual workshop. So it's hands-on, and you'll use the Power Virtual Agent feature in Microsoft's Power Platform to build your own bot, so to speak. So really, Microsoft's Power Platform is designed for citizen developers, as they sometimes call them. So folks that don't develop every day. And so the Power Virtual Agent really allows you to develop a pretty impressive skill set in a bot, and it's more than, it's based not only on Power Platform, but it's leveraging some of that bot framework under the hood. So it's not just a Q&A bot. It's something quite a bit more than that. We're only going to do 10 or 15 people in an event. And right now the first workshop is scheduled for the 23rd, and it's an all-day workshop. So do bear that in mind. You more or less have to check out for the day. And we will incorporate into that workshop some of our guidance on how you build a good user experience with a chatbot. It's really an emerging space. We've heard a lot of interest from the unit at the university level. But I was chatting with somebody at one of the boards the other day and said, "Hey, why can't we get in on that?" And short answer is you can. So sign up if we fill up. I'm like I said, we're going to run pretty small class sizes, and if it fills up, we'll push everybody to a second day and see what we can arrange there. But there's no cost for that. You see the URL at the bottom there, so it's just bit.ly/chatbot in a day. So throw your name in there to RSVP, and we'll get you on the list. So now I wanted to go till the bottom of the hour because we have Greg Milligan joining us as well. So we wanted to give him 10 or 15 minutes and leave a little Q&A time. Hey, Greg, are you out there?
I'm.
Fantastic. Okay, I am going to. You should have presenter rights already, Greg. Let me know if that's not the case. Hey, Wes, is it just me, or do you not hear Greg?
I'm right here.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. How's it going? So I had clicked on request control. Okay, I've got control now. Great, thank you.
It's okay. This new Teams thing is confusing,
Yeah.
Greg. So maybe you can clear that up for everyone.
All right. So you want me to take 10 minutes or so? Does that sound like a good number?
So we blocked off an hour so there'd be some space for Q&A. Take what you want to take there. Yeah, just.
Right. So hello everyone. My name's Greg Milligan. I'm for those that I haven't met. I see a lot of familiar names on the list. So I know some of you. I'm the Office 365 lead for the education team at Microsoft Canada. And I want to take a little bit of time as part of kind of getting ready for what is likely going to be one of the most exciting Septembers, I think, that any of us have faced in the education business. A handful of things around Teams, Office 365 readiness, really kind of with a focus on two things: security and privacy. As more and more students are online, I know that here in Ontario, where I live, a lot of the school boards are coming in at around 30% of students have opted in for online classes. And so that means for some school boards, large cohorts of online students. And I think we'll see common things out in Alberta and other parts of the province, the country as well. So safety and privacy around student access into Teams and other parts of Office 365 is first and foremost. And then the other challenge, I think, for IT is helping teachers and faculty members get ready for the changes that are coming. Because this fall is going to be a whole lot of new updates. I sometimes joke that the roadmap is, seems to be written on water. Things are very fluid based on feedback from customers, other changes that we see in the industry, safety needs, other things like that. So we're basically shipping things as they become available. And so what that means is through this semester, you're going to see things like breakout rooms, like hard mute, other controls for teaching and for meeting through Teams that I think will people are going to want, but they don't necessarily want change in the middle of the semester. So it's always that challenge that IT goes through around change management. So I put in the chat window, I put the link to my OneNote, which is aka.ms/Greg Milligan. Hopefully everyone can see that. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to go through in my OneNote. So just kind of real quick. This is my OneNote right here, aka.ms/Greg Milligan. I shamelessly stole this idea from David Kozera, who's also on the call. He has a very similar OneNote. His looks better than mine. I always say that. And one of the things that I do is a regular community call. And so for those of you that were on my community call in August, I'm going to review some of the content, maybe with a couple of tiny updates. And for those that weren't, this is new for you. And I'll try to do this in 10 minutes or so. So underneath community calls, so I break all this out into a number of different things. There's some COVID assistance. I generally break up my OneNote into different topic areas. Teams is probably one of the busiest. The Skype for Business one obviously isn't. It just says, hey, we're migrating to Teams, so don't stop here, move to here. But down here under community calls, one of the things that I do is I put the slides in here every single month. The recording for this, we use Yammer for this. Ironically, we don't use Teams. We've had a Yammer community for 10 years or so, with thousands of people from across Canada on it, and so we just maintain that as a community. But the one thing that I wanted to point out, the slides are here. The recording, like I say, is in Yammer. If you need to watch the recording and you're not in our Yammer network, please let me know. And again, the link to the Yammer community is here in my OneNote. But I really wanted to kind of focus on a couple of things. We are around, just overall security of your Office 365 environment before we get into tenants. We know that bad actors take advantage of churn in the environment, people not working from their normal environments, people not working from their normal computers. We've seen lots of attacks. One of the ones I worry most about is OAuth apps. And so if you have not looked into OAuth apps and blocking those inside your tenant, please do that now. Simplify your environment, moving to password hash sync, etc. Conditional access. Now is the time to have multi-factor authentication. If people are going to be working from home on their own devices, that's a very untrustworthy environment, and so you'd better have some form of multi-factor authentication, conditional access policy to let them get into things like Teams and OneDrive and that sort of service. And so if you haven't done these yet, there is still time. And talk to myself, talk to David. We can help you through that. This little bit here, I really expect that we will see more and more phishing attacks. We've updated the documentation around Exchange Online Protection, and we now have two really kind of core settings. One is standard and one is strict. I'd recommend that you start moving people into the strict set of settings, which will put suspicious mail into quarantine and instead of junk, other things like that. And then finally, this is the last little bit around moving to modern authentication from basic or legacy. Again, if you want to protect yourself from password spray attacks, which are going to happen to your tenant in this time of churn and uncertainty, this is the way to solve for it. So a couple little things around here. First and foremost, the policies in Teams, which are really what are going to drive safety and security for who's a presenter versus who's an attendee in a team meeting, for example, who can create teams, who can add channels, who can do this, who can do that, who can chat. All of those things can take up to 24 hours and maybe even a little longer. We're hearing that there's been even some delays beyond 24 for some people. So please plan accordingly and take advantage of these global policies. Right? So the global policy really should be your student policy. You can finally support Azure AD security groups. So if you want to be able to say all admin or all teachers or all staff have these capabilities, and you've got an Active Directory security group, and you've synced it to Azure AD, you can now target a policy to that security group, and it will track as changes occur in the security group, which is nice. So if somebody moves from one group into another, we'll automatically trigger those policies inside of Teams. But again, note that it still can take 24 hours, and there's no nested group support. So if you haven't flattened your groups yet, pull out the hammer and start flattening. So that's a little bit of background on a couple of things, planning wise. I did mention guest and external. I'm still finding a few people blocking guests thinking that's more secure. I really don't think it is. I think when you block guest and external access, people will just run off to platforms that you've never heard of. And the next thing you know, you've got people meeting with tools that you aren't supporting. And that's bad as well.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but on the topic of guest access, do you draw any specific boundaries for your education customers around allowing guests, and then any restrictions around content sharing?
Generally, no. I mean, you can whitelist and blacklist from certain domains. You can do that at the Azure AD level, similarly around external access. But these are generally tenant-wide settings. What I do recommend is using things like sensitivity labels. So if the worry is I'm going to invite a guest into, some internal HR or, superintendent team, and they're going to see things they shouldn't, that's where sensitivity labels come in. And so if I apply a sensitivity label on the team or the SharePoint site, that can drive a set of rules that says no guests allowed.
Yeah, perfect. I wanted to get that out there because DLP, I think, is where this, information protection is where that always comes up.
Really that's really where they merge. The other thing is we've just started to do this in SharePoint, where you can actually specify how long guests have access to a SharePoint site, which is interesting. There's an A5 feature called access reviews, where you can trigger an access review and send it back to the owner of the team saying, hey, do you still need these guests to have access? It's an A5 feature. With a little bit of code, you can write your own version of that, which basically goes through and looks at all the guests in your tenant, what teams they're part of, and send a notification to the team owner to say, by the way, you have guests in your team. Make sure that you're aware of that, and do they still need access? Because frankly, that's what you want to do, is remind people that they've given access to somebody from another school board, from the ministry, from some organization somewhere. And if it's time to revoke their access, then you remind them to do that. So you can write a little bit of code and build your own access reviews. So a couple of things here that I really kind of put in sort of one list, which I think whether you enable them or not, there's a couple that I've got check marks on. If you're in the K-12 space, you probably want to stop students from calling. You probably want to stop students from creating teams, which was one of the earlier slides. You want to set their default meeting options, so that way they always join as an attendee, not as a presenter, because presenters can mute others and boot others. Probably the easiest way to remember that. And so you certainly don't want a student, muting the teacher, booting out other people, starting to present content, etc. And counting on the teacher to always remember to choose meeting options when they book things. Instead, just set the defaults. Blocking chat, that is a 50-50 thing. Some school boards turn it on, some turn it off. Blocking video, same sort of thing. But be aware of where they are. You definitely want to block live events and app permissioning. So those are some core things. Hard mute is coming, should be landing this month sometime. Hard mute is the ability to, instead of just saying mute all, you can hard mute everyone. And then even if they try to come off mute, they can't. You won't be able to turn on someone's mic or turn on someone's camera. That goes over the creepy line. There's a privacy issue there. Hard mute both on the audio and the video side will be more about whether I allow the person to come off mute. So think about it that way. I give you the permission to come off mute and speak, but I'm not going to reach through the network and turn on your camera or turn on your microphone. So I'll couple little things here. We did put it together in a couple of nice URLs. This is a really good summary. This ak.ms meeting safety eduadmin, and then on the user side, the meeting safety educator. So for the IT folks on the call, which is probably almost everybody, this URL kind of in one place goes through and says, here's where you set your meetings policies, here's where you set your messaging policies, your app permission policies, your app setup policies, your calling policies, et cetera, in one one spot. So that's a little bit around that. And then the last thing, and I won't drain all of the stuff that's coming. I mean, there's a couple of links that really, I think, highlight all of the things that have either shipped in the last month, or are shipping in September, October timeframe. Some of them are related to safety and privacy, blocking PSTN for dial-in numbers so people don't see what number you call in with, hard mute, things like that. But then there's also an awful lot of Teams meeting experiences, so chat bubbles and live transcription and transcription with attribution, those sorts of things. And breakout rooms, that's the big one that everyone's excited about. By the way, breakout rooms is in private preview right now. It will roll out to a public education preview in the next couple of weeks. So I've got it in my tenant, I've played with it. So I would suggest, if you can, try to split them into two different buckets, so that when you're talking to people, you can say these are things that are coming in Teams that are related to safety and privacy and the safe running of a virtual classroom. And then these are ones that are more feature-based so that a teacher can automatically see, the chat bubbles are pretty neat. I don't need to go to the chat window. I see it show up right beside the student's face, so then I can have something else going in the side window as opposed to the chat stream. Or the transcript with attribution automatically being recorded right there so that, afterwards we can review it. That's more of a meeting experience. And try to give out owners, try to find somebody from outside of IT to be the champion that owns what that feature is when it's coming and can start to socialize and communicate that amongst the educators in the organization. So that there's this balance of, hey, it's a change. I don't like change in the middle of a semester, in the middle of, probably the hardest semester I've ever taught in. But these changes can also help me because they can make my teaching practice better. And so it's striking that balance. And I think, somebody from an ed tech, that's a generic term. Every school board, every district has a different name for that. So that's that one. And then this one here is really trying to manage some expectations, because we are finding some bugs that, especially as we're cross-platform, there are a few things around lobby control that we expected in the May timeframe that are just shipping now. And a lot of it was, it worked in the PC and the Mac client, but we found some weirdness in the iOS client and some students bashing on buttons that all of a sudden, blissfully ignored the security policies that we set up. So have to roll that enhancement back, try to fix it, and get it out there. So if you'd like to, feel free to go through my OneNote and look at the rest. I did throw out all of the features, together mode, dynamic view, large gallery, spotlight, a bunch of other things like that. Feel free to take a look at them. My contact information is in the OneNote. I think everyone knows how to get a hold of me. And I'm happy to answer questions for those that want to do some follow-up. How was that, Pete and Wes? Was that good?
That was great. To come have a conversation. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Everybody appreciates a nice brief update, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks for giving us the time, Greg. I know you guys are busy, and David, you haven't said much. If you want to come on and say hi, David Kazera's been a great friend to us over the last 2 or 3 years for sure.
Yeah, hi folks. Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm just sitting back here and enjoying the content. Yeah, on the Azure AD front, actually, the first topic you brought up, it's worth mentioning too. There's actually a public preview of a new Azure AD Connect endpoint with significant performance increases. And I know for larger institutions, also includes the ability of syncing groups now up to 250,000 objects instead of the 50,000.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're in the deep end of the pool when it comes to object count, that may actually factor for you. And if you're running your Azure AD Connect on a domain controller, single VM right now, definitely take a look at recommended config and how you can deal with availability and performance. All right. So we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. I think we definitely have that. So if you have a question for Greg or Wes or I, by all means, drop it in the chat. Come off of mute. I think it doesn't matter which, really. Somebody managed to PM me here that the URL for that workshop is down in the chat window, but it's right here if you didn't see it. So if you don't get registered right this minute, don't worry about it. Like I said, if we spill over, I'll set up a second day and we'll work it out. But yeah, so we're kind of to the end of the line here. So we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. If you have questions, throw them out there. If not, we'll give you 10 minutes back and say thanks for joining us for nearly an hour today. And we'll get the recording up this afternoon and a link out so you can share it with your work colleagues who couldn't make it.